The giant Apache did not collapse immediately. When the steel jaws finally loosened and fell open, his massive body trembled like a wounded mountain, struggling to remain standing. Blood soaked the dry earth dark and thick, and the smell of iron mixed with pine and fear. For a long moment, the canyon was silent except for the distant caw of a crow and the cowboy's heavy breathing. Slowly the Apache turned his head. His eyes, black, deep, and sharp as obsidian, locked onto the cowboy's face. There was no gratitude in them yet, only judgment. Among his people, mercy was rare, and debt was never forgotten. The cowboy stepped back instinctively, his hand hovering near his revolver, but not drawing it. He knew better. Drawing a gun now would turn salvation into suicide. Instead, he lifted both hands, palms open, a universal sign of peace. "You're free," he said quietly, his voice rough from dust and tension. "That's all I came to do." The Apache said nothing. With a grunt that sounded half like pain and half like pride, he tore a strip from his leather sash, bound his wounded leg with practiced strength, and rose to his full height. Up close he was enormous, broad shoulders, scarred chest, arms thick as fence posts. He could have crushed the cowboy like dry grass. Instead, he nodded once, a slow, solemn motion, then turned and vanished into the trees without another sound. The cowboy stood there long after, unsure if he'd just saved a life or signed his own death warrant. That night, sleep refused to come. The fire crackled low as the cowboy stared into the flames, replaying the Apache's eyes again and again. He had crossed paths with Apaches before, some hostile, some trading, but never one like that. That man carried the weight of leadership, of command. "Chief," the cowboy muttered to himself, the words settling heavy in his chest. He didn't know it yet, but the land had already begun to shift beneath his boots. At dawn, the horses grew restless. Birds fled the trees in sudden waves. The cowboy reached for his rifle just as shadows emerged from the brush, first 2, then 5, then 10. Apache warriors stepped into the clearing, silent and disciplined, rifles and bows trained without trembling. At their center walked the giant from the trap, his leg bandaged, his posture unbroken. Behind him followed an older man with silver threaded through his braids, his face carved by years of sun, war, and wisdom. This was no raiding party. This was something far more dangerous. The older man stopped a few paces away. "You are the one who cut the iron from my son's leg," he said. His English slow but clear. The cowboy swallowed. So it was true. "I did," he answered. "I couldn't leave a man to die like that." The elder studied him, eyes narrowing, then turned to the giant Apache. A few words passed between them in a low, musical language the cowboy could not understand. Finally, the elder looked back. "Among my people," he said, "a life saved creates a bond, stronger than blood." The cowboy felt a chill despite the rising sun. Bonds with Apaches were not simple favors repaid with thanks. They were chains forged by destiny. The elder stepped forward one last time. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will come to our camp. My daughter must see the man who saved her. A brother." The word struck, harder than a bullet. The cowboy opened his mouth to protest, but the Apaches were already turning away, melting back into the land as if they had never been there. Only the echo of the elder's words remained. By nightfall, the cowboy understood one thing with terrifying clarity. Saving that giant Apache had changed his life. Forever. The journey to the Apache camp felt longer than any trail the cowboy had ever ridden, not because of distance, but because every step carried the weight of an unknown fate. The sun climbed high as he followed the narrow path through red rock and cedar, guided by 2 silent Apache warriors who never once looked back to see if he still followed. When the camp finally appeared, hidden within a natural bowl of stone and trees, it looked less like a settlement and more like a fortress shaped by the earth itself. Tipis stood in a wide circle, smoke rising gently into the blue sky, while children paused mid-step and women fell silent as the stranger entered. Every eye turned toward him, not with hatred, but with intense curiosity. This was the man who had saved the chief's son. This was the man destiny had dragged into their lives. The chief stood waiting near the central fire, tall and unmoving, his presence commanding without effort. Beside him stood the giant Apache, now steady on his feet, his wound healing, his gaze no longer suspicious but thoughtful. Then the chief raised his hand, and from one of the largest tipis stepped a woman, who seemed to pull the air itself into stillness. She was the chief's daughter. Her hair fell like midnight down her back, her eyes sharp and intelligent, carrying both kindness and fire. She did not lower her gaze. Instead, she studied the cowboy as if weighing his soul. The cowboy felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear this time, but something far more dangerous. "You saved my son," the chief said, his voice carrying across the camp. "The bear trap was placed by men who do not respect the land. You showed courage where others would have shown cruelty or indifference." He paused, letting the words settle. "Among my people, such a debt cannot be repaid with horses or gold. Blood must answer blood. Life must answer life." The cowboy's heart pounded. He sensed what was coming, but still hoped he was wrong. "You will marry my daughter," the chief said simply. "In this way you will become Apache. The debt will be honored. Peace will be sealed." Murmurs rippled through the camp. The cowboy felt the ground tilt beneath him. Marriage was not a reward. It was a binding oath that could never be undone. He looked at the woman again. She met his eyes without hesitation. There was no fear in her expression, only resolve. "I will not be given to a coward," she said suddenly. Her English fluent and strong. The camp fell silent. "Nor will I be bound to a man who does not understand what he is." Accepting, she stepped closer, her voice lowering. "If you refuse, my people will still honor you. But if you accept, your life will never belong to you alone again." The cowboy took a long breath. He thought of the open plains, the lonely trails, the freedom he had always believed was his greatest wealth. Then he thought of the giant Apache screaming in pain, trapped like an animal, abandoned by the world. He remembered the look in the chief's eyes, not one of threat but of law. "I won't pretend I understand your ways," he said finally, "but I won't turn my back on a life I saved. If marriage is the price, then I'll pay it." A deep, approving sound rolled through the camp. The chief nodded once. "Then hear this truth," he said. "The men who set that trap are coming. They hunt more than animals. They hunt Apache blood. By marrying my daughter, you will stand with us when they come." At that moment, the cowboy understood the full meaning of the chief's demand. This was not only about honor, it was about war. That night, as drums echoed under the stars and the firelight danced across painted faces, the cowboy sat beside the chief's daughter. She spoke softly of her people, of loss, of strength passed from mother to daughter, of a future written not by fear but by courage. The cowboy listened, realizing that the greatest trap he had stepped into was not made of iron, but of fate. And if you want to witness the wedding that shocked the frontier, the ambush that tested the cowboy's loyalty, and the moment he chose between the life he knew and the family he never expected, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because this story doesn't end here. It only grows stronger.